Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to the channel. It's a pleasure to meet somebody new. Today I have another dip into console history, and an unusual console that I didn't even know existed till I was hanging out in a buddy's stream and someone happened to mention it. Obviously, as soon as I found out it was a thing, I immediately started digging into the system to see if I could find enough to build a video around it and share it with those of you who weren't there to get your curiosity piqued, or would rather just let someone like me do the digging and present it to you and then maybe do more digging on your own, which is always great to see. Which, you know, and totally reasonable as well. So, for that crowd, or those of you who haven't heard of this thing and clicked on it, welcome on in as we sit down to talk about the Creativision. Yeah, this is kind of a fun one to come back to. It's been a minute, folks. Let's dig in. Now, before we get into the console itself, we should probably talk about who made it. VTech. Now, this is a pretty predominant company in the grand scheme of things, even if you really don't know the name. You see, they own brands like Leapfrog, which makes edutainment software and the like. They also make smartwatches for kids and baby monitors. So if you have kids or work in an office that uses office phones, chances are that you've had one of their products or at least seen one. By the way, they make office phones. I forgot to mention that. However, this company actually got its start doing things way earlier than this, all the way back in 1976, by two people called Alan Wong and Stephen Leung. I'm certain I butchered that in some way. They actually started out making home TV consoles, Pong units mostly, and then moved more into the handheld games like Chicky-Woggy. Look, don't ask. It's a weird name. This is a simple LCD game that would also tell the time and allow the user to set an alarm, much like the Game & Watch series of games by Nintendo, right? It would also appear in other forms, like small arcade units, like the Pac-Man games of the day and the like. These were pretty successful, and before long, VTech actually decided they wanted to get into the growing computer and game console market, and began working on their first and, to my knowledge, only official console release, if you don't count Leapfrog, in the Creativision console. Now, I can only assume that the name came about due to the popularity of having Vision in the name. I mean, you had ColecoVision and Intellivision already existing. Maybe they were just looking to capitalize on the name recognition or confusion to get people to jump into their ecosystem. Maybe they just thought it sounded cool. Who knows? But a lot of consoles were named like this in the second generation of consoles because they had Vision. These are the jokes, folks. I'm sorry. You're just going to have to suck it up and live with me or find someone who's actually funny. The Creativision was made primarily for European markets, being distributed in countries like Germany, Australia, Switzerland, but also released in Italy and South Africa, and released under a few names. Educat 2002 in Israel, the Dick Smith Wizard in Australia. No, I'm not kidding. That was the actual name. New Zealand got that name as well. Just a few names that the console had. Those were just a few. We're going to stop on that one, which is probably going to get me demonetized. Now, this was an 8-bit console with a Rockwell 6502 CPU. Now, this was a pretty typical processor to be used in consoles around this time, with Atari using it in their 8-bit PCs and consoles as well. Nintendo would later use it in their Nintendo Entertainment System. It was also a respectable resolution for the time, being at 256 by 192 with 16 colors and 32 sprites. Doesn't sound like much, but at the time, not too shabby. Its interface was two controllers that were wired to the main console. They kind of plugged in, so they could be disconnected. It was much like the ColecoVision and Atari 5200 controllers. However, there was a difference in the Creativision. The controllers actually had a keyboard on them. Half the keyboard was on one controller and the other half was on controller 2. The reason for this is simple. It was actually intended to be a hybrid console, much like the ColecoVision, being a PC and console in one. Though in this configuration, they had decided to build the keyboard into the controller rather than having a separate attachment that makes it into a computer. They just built it into the main system instead. That's not to say that you couldn't get a full keyboard for the unit, and you absolutely could. and it would plug in just where the controllers were, allowing you to type more normally on a regular keyboard, and plug the controllers in as well. It also had pretty common ports for the time that would allow to use cassette players, which were often used for software at the time. It allowed for a floppy disk drive and apparently even a modem, although it's questionable if the modem was actually even released. I couldn't really find a lot of records on it. Heck, this thing even had a memory expansion with it as well, which is pretty dope. As for its games, those commonly came in cartridge format, which was pretty standard at the time, and had 18 games in total over the lifespan of the system. This is honestly kind of odd and a shallow cart listing for a system that released in 1982 and was running all the way up to 1986. Many of these games, well, they had names that were pretty common for games around this time, like Air Sea Attack, right? I mean, this was a fixed shooter where you play a submarine that's under assault by ships, submarines, and even airplanes. The idea is to shoot them all down, much like Space Invaders, with the cadence or speed up, without any of the cadence or speed up that the latter game had. And graphically, it looks pretty good. Very reminiscent of something that you'd see on the Intellivision or the ColecoVision. Tank Attack was another game on the system. This one honestly reminds me of the tank games that released around the time on like the Atari 2600 and stuff like that, only a little bit more graphically impressive than, say, the 2600 itself. One of the most interesting and odd ones that I think I ran into while looking up on the system was called Crazy Chicky. Yeah, like the name would imply, this game actually has you playing a chicken in a Pac-Man-like environment. This is honestly not surprising. Pac-Man was a really popular game to clone. However, this one had an interesting twist. Instead of eating pellets, you peck holes into the ground. Honestly, it's what it looks like, at least on the screen. As you can see, it's like you're playing a reverse Pac-Man, putting power pellets down as you move along. Like most games of this type, you would have a power-up, much like a power pellet, only this one's shaped like a carrot or something that would allow you to eat up anteaters? Honestly, I am not sure what these things are. However, it allows you to send them back to their pen? Look, I don't know. This is a second-generation game, and a lot of this is just left up to the player's imagination, rather than graphical fidelity, which no one had at the time. As you can see, the library, while not very big, had a lot of quality games, and wasn't the only kind of games that the system could play. Well, one version of it at least. You see, this console came in a few forms. The original, which we've talked about, the Mark II, which was a later revision and added the capability for the console to use a ColecoVision adapter module. This, of course, allowed it to boot up and run ColecoVision games, drastically upping its library. They also made another variant of the console, this one more PC focused, in the Laser 2000, or the VC2000. This was released in 1983 and had a form factor much like the Spectrum ZX and early Commodore PC form factors, in that it's essentially a keyboard you plug into a monitor and boot it up. Instead of using carts, this version tended to use cassette tapes. Again, not an uncommon feature for the time. It may or may not, however, have had an adapter to allow it to use some of the original 18 carts. I couldn't completely confirm that. Reception to any and all of these systems was kind of lackluster. It just never really meshed with what the consumer wanted around the time that it came out, and like a lot of the hybrid PC/console type systems, failed to fully be embraced by either side. Most likely because it was too little of a computer to appeal to the hardcore PC crowd, and too complicated and overly fussy for the console crowd who simply just wanted something to play games on. The lack of software over its run likely also led to it having issues in the grand scheme of things, as well as the 18 games over nearly 4 years of its run. It's hardly a deep library to speak of. Couple that with the fact that a lot of its games were clones of other titles or had similar variants in a multitude of different consoles, and you can see why it might struggle to find a place in the fast-growing and ever-changing early gaming market that was quickly going from 4 bits to 8 bits, on the cusp of hitting 16 bits within 3 years of this console being discontinued. Technology specs were just accelerating at a frighteningly fast pace around this time, and the market already had a wide array of options to choose from in both the PC and console side of the fence. In the end, the console became mostly an unknown and forgotten oddity in the gaming industry, having its niche fans, but never really getting really well known to the other heavy hitters, at least in the gaming industry. And once the Master System and Nintendo Entertainment System were launched, faded mostly away and was forgotten under the onslaught of changing game design choices like focus level design, story-driven games, and rendered cutscenes that were more in tune with what people wanted than the arcade high-score type of gameplay that had been popular before. Even if it continued to progress along its path, it would have eventually been seen as mostly dated, a relic of a time loved by those who lived it, but not reaching much past that audience. As such, I kind of suspect that even if it had a larger library and a more focused concept, it would have faded just like the ColecoVision, Television, and Atari-style consoles did over time, unless they had kept up with the changing taste of gamers as the market grew and expanded. However, that's enough of me. What do you guys think of this interesting console curiosity? Do you think it's a cool console? Did any of you ever hear about this or play one back in the day? Do any of you have any fond memories of it that you'd like to share? Heck, do you know another unusual console like this that we should look into on this channel? If so, let me know in the comments. While you're there, if you don't mind, please leave this video a like. It actually really does help me out more than you know. Also, if you see more of my stuff you like, consider following the channel. That helps me out a ton. Hopefully I'll be able to get more content out. I'm wanting to do more longer content like this, but that's neither here nor there. Till we meet again, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for spending time with me, and happy gaming.